The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
If Canada is headed for a federal election this fall, the new leader of the Conservative Party will be one of the main contenders on the hustings. Erin O'Toole beat the odds this summer to win the job, and he's with us tonight to expand on what he hopes to accomplish. Then, our Ontario hubs check in on homeschooling in the southwestern part of this province. And from economic turmoil to a summer of politics, it's the Agenda's Week in Review. It's Friday, September 11th, and that's all ahead on the Agenda. Although he is the Member of Parliament for Durham, and it was his second crack at the leadership of the federal Conservative Party, Erin O'Toole was not the frontrunner going into this year's contest to take over from Andrew Scheer. But proving once again that campaigns matter, the former Harper cabinet minister and veteran of the Royal Canadian Air Force won the job on the third ballot. He's now leader of Canada's official opposition and a man on a mission to introduce himself to Canadians. And with that, we welcome Erin O'Toole, who is in Ontario's capital city tonight. First of all, Erin, it's good to see you again, and congratulations. That was a nice, short little coronation you enjoyed a few weeks back.
Well, it was the culmination of a long campaign, Steve, and it's great to be on one of my favorite public affairs shows, The Agenda, as leader of the Conservatives.
I don't know if you know this, but it's actually been almost 60 years. Lester Pearson was the last Prime Minister of Canada who actually had military experience. So if you get the job, you will be blazing a relatively untrod path over the last 6 decades. So let's start there. What in your military background do you think helps prepare you for the job you want?
Well, I learned that if you can't follow and be part of a team, you can't have the skills and ability to lead that team. So I'm very proud over the course of my life that whether in the military or business, my charitable work, or in other circumstances, I have been part of teams and learned from the people around me. And now I'm taking all those skills with me to lead, Steve. My military time really deepened my love of the country. I'm a patriot, a word that some people even look askance at when you say that. But I love this country. I'm worried about some of the challenges we're facing. And my military time also let me live and train and serve in all parts of the country. So I'm going to use the discipline that I gained there, but also skills I learned as a dad, a husband, a kid from the suburbs of Toronto. I'm a regular guy that's been given this awesome responsibility to try and get our country back on track.
Well, let's dive into some of the issues here. You have been critical of the current government's response to the pandemic. I wonder if you could tell me off the top, do you think the eligibility criteria for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the CERB, do you think those criteria were too broad?
Well, I proposed in late February, Steve, to actually use the EI system, expand the EI system to be there for people that were losing jobs or employment as a result of COVID shutdowns, including self-employed people. So I think there's always been some gaps in the EI system that we would have needed to address. And when I was proposing this, the government was still saying there was no problem. We didn't even have to close the border. So the Trudeau government was a month and a half to 2 months late from where they should have been in terms of a response. I also think more important than what became the CERB program, Steve, they were slow and very confused on the wage subsidy. And so when employers were saying, how can I hold on to my employees over what could be several months of closures, they weren't sure what support was there to keep the jobs, and they saw the government roll out a CERB with really no qualifying criteria, very easy. So it led many employers to lay off and let go more people, and that's going to compound our challenges rebuilding the economy as more people were let go because of the mismanagement of the programs by the Trudeau government.
Well, let me pick up on that then. There is, I gather, a new style of economic thinking among some, thanks to the COVID crisis, which suggests that balanced budgets are no longer the, the be-all and end-all of financial stability because we managed to go from a $30 billion deficit to a $363 billion deficit in 1 year, and apparently the country is still alive. Do you believe balanced budgets are really the fiscal imperative today that we presumably once always thought they were?
Well, I think we can't live beyond our means forever. The parliamentary budget officer said the way the Trudeau government's headed, these sort of massive deficits, $100 billion plus, Steve, there's only 2 years before the fiscal capacity of the government crashes to a halt and we have serious, serious pain. So we have to be balanced. My focus will be on the well-being of families and working Canadians. We need to make sure that people get back to work and that we highlight the nobility of work, Steve. Particularly people that come to Canada with very little. I'm blown away in Mississauga and Brampton and in Surrey, BC, when these new Canadians come and within 2 decades, they're employing 30 other people. And there's a nobility in that risk-taking and that working hard to provide for your family. That will be my focus. GDP growth is great. Reducing overspending is great, but it has to be done in a way that allows people to provide for their family, for their aged parents. So I've said we've got to get our fiscal house in order over the next decade or so. The focus will not be a rapid tightening of the belt to get to a balanced budget. The focus will be the well-being of Canadian families.
I did see your Labor Day social media video, which aired the other day, obviously, and I have to say, I can't recall a time when a Conservative leader put forth a message that was so unabashedly pro-worker, even pro-union. You say the goal of economic policy should be more than wealth creation, but about solidarity. What kind of signal are you sending in as much as, are you changing the ideology of what it means to be a Conservative right now in the country?
I'm showing that I want more people, Steve, to look in the mirror and see a Conservative staring back at them, particularly if they're working families. I want the auto worker in Windsor, the steel worker in Hamilton and Sault Ste. Marie seeing themselves as Conservative, because here's the reality. We are the only party that supports building things in Canada, building pipelines, getting Canadian energy to market, having a softwood lumber deal so we can reopen some of our mills in British Columbia and Northern Ontario that have been shut down. I'm proud of the fact that our prospecting, developing, exploration, mines, that's what Canada's known for. We can't shut all this down as the Liberals would like to. So if people want to get up early in the morning and work hard, they're going to have me in their corner. And they should realize they're Conservative, because Jagmeet Singh was supporting the illegal rail blockades months ago, shutting down jobs for working families because of protest culture and activism. We need a party that will stand up for people that want to work hard, build the country, and union members. I mentioned them in my victory speech at 1:30 in the morning, Steve. I want them to see a place for unions and standing up for workers in the Conservative Party.
I was up and I saw the speech, and the fact that you were awake to deliver it, more power to you. Okay, I don't want to take a lot of time on this because I know you've talked about it ad nauseum, but I do want to talk about the big blue tent just a little bit. Can a leader who is pro-choice on abortion, as you are, who is pro-same-sex marriage, as you are, who is pro-LGBTQ rights, as you are, satisfy the social conservatives in your party who helped you win?
Well, I am the leader as well, as I am, to use your structure. I didn't hide the fact that I got into politics to build a prosperous country and to see Canada take its place on the world stage with our values and allies. And then I didn't get into politics to remove rights from my fellow citizens. I got into politics to safeguard and protect those rights, much like our men and women in uniform are seen standing up for our rights in our institutions. I do have an approach of respect, though, Steve, and I think you know my style well enough that I will have debates and I will respect people even if I don't agree with their point of view. So I have a good relationship with social conservatives. They're a very important part of our party. And how can we work on issues related to religious freedom, helping the vulnerable, standing up for the great work done by faith communities across the country, rather than shutting them out of programs like the Liberals did with the Canada Summer Jobs Grants. So I think there is a place. I've been very clear when it comes to rights, and I received a clear mandate in the leadership, Steve. So I think we can keep the big blue tent, expand it even more, and hold the Liberals to account really on their record on the economy, our standing in the world, and the fact that Canada is more divided than it's been in my lifetime.
I appreciate everything you say, and this is, I mean, it's a bit of a double standard in politics in as much as this is something every Conservative leader has to deal with in ways that other party leaders don't have to deal with. But I'm just going by what many of your supporters have said, which is your party's got to find another million votes somewhere in the country or you can't win a majority government. And you know, you'll forgive me for putting it this way, but currying too much favor with social conservatives will be, in the eyes of some, a very difficult way to attract those million new voters. How do you walk that tightrope?
I don't think it's as hard as you suggest, Steve. You know, I grew up in the Toronto area. We all know the food drive at Christmas for the Daily Bread Food Bank. Why is it called Daily Bread? Because it was started by faith community, as most of the shelters for the vulnerable outreach programs were all started by people motivated by their faith. That's important. I respect that. And we need to show that people can bring their faith or their cultural perspectives to public life. And how can we influence public policy in a way that we're helping tackle issues like homelessness and other things, not by boxing out people because they happen to be motivated by their faith convictions. How can we work on areas where there's common ground, where there's positive public policy? And I've always talked about this, and standing up for some of these things in an age where if you even talk about faith, some parties will kick you out of the party, like with Mr. Trudeau. I think we just need to focus on things that bring Canadians together and reassure people that rights granted to Canadians through the Charter or the courts are going to be rights not only I support, I defend as Conservative leader.
Let's talk a little foreign policy. It is, of course, extremely rare that foreign policy ever becomes a decisive issue at the ballot box. But having said that, I'm still interested in what your approach is. You know, there is this sort of Pearsonian approach that has been the way for Canada for many, many decades, where Canada tries to play a bit of a soft power, moderating influence in the world. And then there's more brass knuckles power politics. Which camp are you in?
Well, I would suggest to you you're not defining the Pearsonian approach correctly, Steve. He actually said in a famous speech, whether it's in the Korean Peninsula or in Germany, when a Canadian soldier stands up for rights and for other countries, they're defending Canada just as much as they were here. So the Pearsonian tradition is actually not just wrapped up in this peacekeeping myth that was created. Canada of Vimy Ridge, of World War II, as I remind my American friends regularly, Canada was in both of those global conflicts before the Americans because of our commitment to our allies and our values. We always play a role commensurate with our size and ability, and we're never belligerent, which I think is amazing about us. But you can count on us to stand up for things we believe in, sometimes in the peacekeeping context, but in the post-COVID world, particularly with respect to China, I think we have to stand with countries like Australia, the UK, and others to start rebalancing global trade patterns that have been disrupted by China, start standing up for human rights, the situation in Hong Kong, the situation with the Uyghurs, which I think is atrocious, you know, a religious minority being persecuted and taken to re-education camps. So I think Canadians don't want us just chasing the almighty buck. They want us standing up for our values alongside our traditional allies.
Every single politician who eventually gets into a position of power in this country says something like that. And then when it comes time to realize that it's going to hurt our businesses if we actually say what we mean on China, they compromise or they fold or they just put those principles aside for a second. How do we know you won't be the same?
Because I've grown up with a very distinct view of a real view of China. Unlike Mr. Trudeau, who said it was the country he most admired because the dictatorship gets things done quickly. My time in the military saw the rise of China as a security issue and a global military power. When I worked in the private sector, I saw how China didn't respect global intellectual property and was involved in counterfeit operations and was not abiding by global trade rules. So I've had a realistic view from China from the day I was elected, Steve. And post-COVID, I think the world is going to realize that there's a realignment of global trade. I've been talking about free trade amongst free countries. So here's the kicker. A more principled approach to China today is actually good for business because, Steve, I want to bring back some critical manufacturing to Canada, starting with PPE, protective personal equipment. I've actually worked personally with Premier Ford on a mask company that'll be opening and manufacturing in the Barrie area and not in China. We need to see more of that. We need to see some manufacturing return to Southern Ontario, and it may involve Canada having to look at tariffing other nations. And so that sounds a bit crazy for someone who's a free trader, but I want free trade amongst countries that follow the rules. And that's what we haven't seen with respect to China.
We are in the midst of a cultural/race relations reckoning across North America right now, and I just want to touch on that in our conversation here tonight. There are people in this country who believe that Canada was built on white supremacy. What do you think of that?
Well, I tried to address that this week in my first speech to caucus, Steve, and I know you've written a lot about this, how we look back at the past based on our values of today. It's a difficult exercise, and I quoted Senator Sinclair, who ran the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. How can we not tear down and destroy statues and erase our history, but how can we provide context so that people understand it today to actually show we've made progress and identify where areas we need to make more progress? I raised Louis Riel in my speech as well, which probably had some in the press gallery going, is Erin O'Toole wading into history, wading into politically correct, unnavigable waters? No one is a perfect figure. I'm a politician that's going to be asking people to back me for prime minister. I'm not perfect, Steve, and I'm always trying to be ethical and to do my best. But we should look back and say people like MacDonald, people like Riel did some incredible things to build the country that I think is the greatest in the world. They also did some terrible things and were flawed and were people of their era. So how can we learn, not strike down? And I think this presentism, judging 160 years ago by the standards and morals of today, is a bit of a dangerous game, and it can be used for a political narrative, often on the left. So I try and wade in respectfully. I've been talking about this for many years now, and I think Canadians don't want to see historical figures canceled. They want to see a serious discussion so that we can learn and get better.
Many conservative politicians, and I think Doug Ford's one of them, think it's unfair to be compared to Donald Trump. But you just named your economic plan Canada First, which sounds a bit like America First, which is what he's going after. What are you signaling by calling your plan Canada First?
I'm signaling that we need to be ready for a second wave of COVID-19. And there's sometimes we can't even trust our closest friends in the United States because we saw what happened with 3M and PPE when the world was in crisis, Steve. So when I've talked about bringing some jobs and critical manufacturing back to Canada, and have worked already with Premier Ford and other levels of government on this, that's what I mean. We have to be able to be ready, because if we have a second wave, I want to make sure our seniors and our vulnerable citizens are taken care of, that our frontline healthcare workers and essential workers have what they need. And the hope is we learn the lessons from the first wave and don't have a complete economic shutdown. We learn how to distance, how to use masks, how to sanitize, how to avoid transmission, keep the curve flat, and putting an emphasis on getting Canada ready, making sure we're not going to rely on anyone else, Steve, because we saw in a pandemic that can't happen. You can't rely on others. You have to have that ability yourself. And I think a lot of Canadians want to know that to reassure the country as we head in to the next number of months where we could see continued spike in cases.
I do want to do one little follow-up here on populism, though, because on the one hand, you did bang a bit of a populist drum during the course of your leadership campaign. On the other hand, I hear David Hurley, who used to represent the Liberal Party quite actively when Paul Martin was the Prime Minister. I heard him on the Hurley Burley podcast say things like, you are you are hitting the populist notes, but in a very reasonable way these days. So let me ask you, walking that tightrope, not being Trumpy in the way you are populist, being a more reasonable populist, are we onto something here in terms of the secret to what you hope will be your success?
Well, I often look at figures like Winston Churchill, the will of the people and the will of Parliament. Is that populism, Steve? You know, I'm trying to address the hopes, aspirations, and concerns of Canadians. Western alienation, my friends here in Ontario don't know how deep-seated the frustration is in Western Canada. They see Ottawa having removed their ability to thrive. Is my addressing their concerns? In some cases, they want to leave the country. Is that populism, or is that just listening to the needs of the people? My fight for working families and wanting to get more union members and stand up for them as a leader, is that populism, or is that just responding and making sure the Conservative Party is relevant to the needs of the day? I don't define it in any way. I would say what we're doing here is a little more similar to what Boris Johnson has done in the UK. We have looked to see how he made breakthroughs with long-standing Labour voters by championing this concept of building the country stronger, more resilient together. We don't look to anyone but ourselves for guidance, but certainly I want to make sure Canadians, more of them, see themselves reflected in our party.
Okay, we often spend time on this program talking bigger pictures as opposed to the news of the day, but people are going to think I'm an idiot if I don't ask you how you're going to vote on the throne speech coming up. So let me do one little sort of politics of the day question. Have you made a decision on how you will vote on the throne speech yet?
Well, Steve, you know my father had a number of great expressions. He said, "You're born with two ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you talk." I haven't heard the throne speech yet, Steve. And in fact, when the Prime Minister called to congratulate me the morning after I won the leadership, it was just a nice call. But I said, look, there's two things I want to talk about, Prime Minister. One is Western alienation. It is serious. Our unity is at risk. And the other is the return of parliamentary committees studying a range of things that were shut down by prorogation. And I said, particularly with the throne speech, if you continue to strike down the resource economy, you're going to not just undermine our prosperity as a country, you're going to lead to more division. So I want to see what he has in the speech. I don't want him to use this speech as an excuse to avoid accountability and force some election on some green boondoggle sort of shiny object speech. I want to see sleeves rolled up. And how are we going to get the million Canadians who are unemployed and ending CERB benefits? How are we going to get them back to work? How are we going to get our country moving and unite some of the people losing faith in our country? And we're willing to work with them if there's some practical solutions there. We also, as I said in my victory speech, we have to start defining our own vision for Canadians, and I will try and do a bit of that as well.
They are probably counting on the fact that you, as a brand new leader whose feet are barely wet as the leader of your party, will want to avoid a general election this soon into your tenure. What do you make of that?
That's probably part of their calculus, Steve. I think they think, hey, nobody knows this kid from Bowmanville, Ontario, who had to introduce himself in his victory speech. I don't claim to be a celebrity. Mr. Trudeau's birth was covered in Maclean's magazine. Mine certainly wasn't. But I'm proud of the values I was raised with and how hard I've worked. So we will be ready. I'm trying to get out there and meet people. And we will be ready. We're in a better fiscal position than the Liberals. We've paid off our loan from the last campaign. They have not. We have this same sort of organizational structure in place. We have literally hundreds of people across the country reaching out, wanting to run for us in all parts of Canada. So we will be ready. I said, if they're rattling sabers, Steve, our saber is sharper and ready to go. But my preference is to try and build a vision for Canada and have an election not on Justin Trudeau's timing, but when Canada's ready for it.
Okay. In our remaining moments here, I want to ask you a couple of personal questions. And you know, we're not getting off the path here because you did actually refer to this in your victory speech at 1:30 in the morning on the morning that you won the leadership. Erin, how old were you when your mother died?
I was 9 when my mom died of breast cancer, and I was the oldest of three children at the time, and it's a defining part of my life. And I mention it because my daughter Molly, who just started high school this week, Steve, is named after my mother, who's still an important, very important part of my life.
I suspect Canadians would, as they want to get to know you better, would like to know how in heaven's name you as a 9-year-old managed to get through all that.
Well, our family, my dad was one of 9 kids from Peterborough, Ontario. So my aunts, including an aunt who was a nun at the time, took time off from her missionary work in Brazil to come stay with myself and my sisters. My Aunt Jane remains an important part of my life. All my sisters helped. My dad hadn't made probably a meal. He worked at General Motors and suddenly was on his own with 3 kids. Our neighbors on Morgandale Crescent in Bowmanville, I'll never forget them, Steve. And some people on that street know that I start every campaign by going to Morgandale Crescent. I never want to forget my roots. And I did that the day after I became leader, or my first trip into Bowmanville, we stopped at Morgandale, and that's formative in my life. I had great admiration for my father, who persevered. And then I was amazingly lucky to have a second mother. I don't even like using the term stepmom because Peggy became our mom and the glue of our family. And then we grew to 5 children. All families face this adversity. That's why I told our caucus this week, our motto is my old Air Force motto, per ardua ad astra, through adversity to the stars. Because not only did that little kid who lost his mom persevere, I'm very proud of all my siblings, my mom, my dad, and our family and our extended family and our community in Durham really helped us succeed. And that's why I admire public service so much. And I think despite all the slings and arrows in politics, it's worth it if you think you're helping your community and your country.
Let's spend our last minute here talking about your dad, because I think the last time you were in this studio, you were with your dad, John O'Toole, who of course was the member of provincial parliament for Durham. At the same time, you were the member of the federal parliament for Durham. I think that's the only time in Canadian history when father and son have represented the same riding at the same time, and we had a conversation about that. I want to go back to the night of the leadership convention where you won, and I want to know what the first thing your dad said to you was after he saw you when you won.
I think it might be the first time in John O'Toole's life, Steve, that he was speechless. He was just so proud, and to see him, in the COVID era, I gave the most important speech of my life at 1:30 to a largely empty room, but it didn't matter to me because my wife Rebecca and our children Molly and Jack were there, and my mom and dad were there, and to see my dad out of the corner of my eye, kind of hugging Molly when I mentioned my mom and his late wife Molly. Gosh, he was just so emotional. He wants to move to Ottawa now, Steve, to be part of it. And look, I'm just so fortunate to have been instilled with these values, and I'm still the sort of small town Toronto suburbs kid. And I would not only be the first military veteran prime minister since Pearson. Pearson was the last Ontarian, Steve. He represented the Algoma riding. I would be the first prime minister to represent a riding in the GTA. I think that's pretty exciting too.
That is the new leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, Erin O'Toole, who's also the Member of Parliament for Durham. I look forward to the day, Erin, when we can actually have a conversation in person in this studio. But in the meantime, it's been good having you on TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, Steve. Great to be with you.
While many kids are back in their classrooms, plenty of others now simply flip open their computers or head off in some other direction to start their day of homeschooling. Mary Baxter covers the southwestern part of the province for Ontario Hubs. She joins us now from London for a sense of how kids and parents are getting the homeschool up and running. Welcome to the show, Mary.
It's good to be here, JN.
Now, you've written a piece on tvo.org about homeschooling, and the agenda next week will be delving into this, but I want to get us started on the difference between homeschooling and online learning, because there is some differences there.
Yes, and actually, the fact that people don't know there's a difference right now has caused some confusion in the whole homeschooling community. When we talk about homeschool, in kind of the traditional sense, it's children who are taken out of school, not only out of the classroom, but also often out of the curriculum, the Ontario school curriculum, and it's essentially known as parent-led learning, versus what we're seeing now with many schools is that they're offering online alternatives to classes at home for kids to work on. But it's still school. It's a virtual classroom. That's the basic difference.
Now, doctors and mental health experts are advising traditional classroom settings are important for kids both for routine and socialization. How can homeschooling accomplish that?
Well, again, this is the interesting part of homeschooling in the homeschooling in the traditional sense is that it's fallen under a lot of criticism because people think, oh, where are the social opportunities, the opportunities for kids to acquire those kinds of skills? But several of the homeschooler parents that I spoke to talk about how they have Facebook groups where they trade off ideas and also arrange to go on outings with each other and with the family. So kids get an opportunity to socialize with other kids right up through the age range as well. And then, of course, learning is not something that just happens at the home. They're also doing things like going out to museums. They might be taking trips to places that might make a unique product, for instance, maybe a farm that has a special kind of crop that they can find out about, or going on road trips to other communities to find out about them.
I'm curious, has the pandemic maybe changed the plans for some of these outings, which, for students who are normally homeschooling, does that add a little challenge there as well?
Yeah, it certainly does this year. I'm hearing about that. Homeschoolers, of course, the parents are all volunteers. They're not paid like teachers. And it's sometimes very hard for them to juggle their schedules to figure out how can they get all of those safety components into place to get together and to meet. And in many cases, they're doing things like they're paring down their meetings, making events simpler and trying to incorporate those precautions. But they're all quite concerned about the COVID this year and how to keep everybody safe.
Do we have a sense at all of how many families and parents are opting for homeschooling in the province?
This is a challenge to answer this question. I did speak to a number of homeschooling groups. They're all seeing their memberships increase. One person who operates a number of websites says on one of the websites they're seeing over the summer, they've seen membership increase, maybe 7 or 8 people a day kind of thing. But when I asked the province, the Ministry of Education, if they could give me an idea, they won't have all of the numbers in until mid-year. I've heard from People for Education organization, they estimate it's somewhere between 20 to 30% of all kids learning from home. And also with local school boards, they're seeing percentages somewhere around 15%. But then, of course, only a portion of those would be doing traditional homeschooling.
I want to talk a little bit about the at-home curriculum a little bit. How do parents decide what and how to teach certain lessons, whether it's math, English, or geography, for example?
Well, that's the interesting thing is we think about them as being lessons and as kind of codified. And this comes from the Ontario curriculum, of course, or from curriculums in general and public schooling. But again, they have many different kinds of approaches that they can choose from. So some parents might work with what their child's interests are. Other parents might work on kind of building hands-on skills. They might seek a curriculum. They might even work a bit with the Ontario curriculum, or they might work with another form of curriculum, a Canadian curriculum, for instance. So there's several choices out there for parents.
Now, I'm curious, for some parents that you spoke to, this is a temporary solution as, we are still in a pandemic. What happens when students rejoin school? Because as we know, students will have, at certain points in the school years, opportunities to go back. What happens when they do? Will they be behind? Will they be ahead? How does it work?
Well, what happens is that they would be assessed to determine what level they're at and then put into that level. There's some challenges for students. I also spoke to veteran homeschoolers, and they were telling me that they might do something like homeschool their kids up to high school, for instance, and kids would go back then. For graduation, they tell me that going in kind of the year before graduation is better because sometimes certain classes have prerequisites. If they're looking at going to, college, they may look at taking a special placement exam to determine if they have everything that they need to qualify for admittance.
Mary, I want to thank you so much. It's Mary Baxter, our Ontario Hub journalist covering Southwestern Ontario. And of course, we'll be continuing this conversation about homeschooling next week on the agenda. Thank you again.
Thanks, Jayanne.
The agenda's first week of this, our 15th season, looked at kids' mental health during this pandemic and what the economy needs in the days and months ahead to recover. The agenda's week in review begins getting caught up on a summer of Canadian politics.
When Mr. Morneau was shown the door, I mean, he resigned because he could see what was happening to him. He had no support in the cabinet. The Liberals have no business Liberals anymore. The Liberal cabinets in the past, going back to Pierre Trudeau and Jean Chrétien, always had spending Liberals and business Liberals. This government has no business Liberals. They're all spending Liberals, every one of them, including the Prime Minister. So the next budget is going to be extremely expansionist. Money's going to be spent left, right, and center. And it's at that point that they'll use the skills that we've heard today from our polling friends as to whether they should go for an election or not. The last point I'd make is elections are very unpredictable. Mr. Trudeau ought to know that because the first time he won, he started the campaign in third place and Tom Mulcair was measuring the drapes at 24 Sussex Drive. And the Liberals won the election. Last time, they sunk during the campaign. By the way, I think it's interesting that the polling numbers show the Liberals ahead by 12 points among women. But if they're even with the Conservatives overall, they got to be about 10 or 12 points behind among men. And that's a bit of a problem for the Liberals. It's hard to form a majority when you're 12 points behind among men.
Sean, I'd ask you to weigh in on the fortunes or the potential fortunes of the Conservatives at the moment, in as much as you've got the WE scandal, which admittedly is out of the headlines right now, but it certainly has a place in the public consciousness. Having said that, Erin O'Toole's barely got his feet wet as the leader. How concerned would you be about pulling down the government's throne speech, knowing that you've got a guy in his literally first months as leader at the helm right now?
Well, he's certainly on a steep learning curve, Steve, given the prospect or potential for an election campaign mere weeks away. To your question to Jeffrey about whether Mr. Trudeau and his team secretly would like an election, I think the answer is yes. The one entity not on Saatchi's polling figures is Donald Trump, who is deeply unpopular with the Canadian public. And I think Mr. Trudeau and his team would actually like the prospect of running a parallel campaign in Canada while the U.S. presidential election slumps on. Mr. Trump will be counted on to say outrageous things, and Mr. O'Toole would be forced to spend most of the campaign responding to questions about Mr. Trump and the extent to which his party and his vision converges or diverges with the polarizing president. The other reason why I think that the Liberals would like a campaign is if they're brought back with the majority, they'll be able to put the stick in the spokes of the WE investigation. The only reason we've gotten as far as we have, of course, is because opposition members presently make up a majority of the members on the committees investigating the grant to the WE charity. Prorogation was a short-term attempt to slow that process down. A new majority mandate would be what the Liberals need to shut it down. And so I think all opposition leaders, including Mr. O'Toole, face a difficult question in how they ultimately vote on the speech from the throne and perhaps a federal budget. I think there'll be plenty there for the opposition, for the Conservatives to oppose and reject. I think more pressure will be on Mr. Singh and whether the new Democratic Party is prepared to support the Liberals, given the likelihood, as Jeffrey says, that the speech from the throne and the budget will advance several progressive priorities. Is that enough to secure NDP support or not, I think will be the major question in the upcoming parliamentary session.
And let me get Vicky to pick up the story there on the Social Democratic part of the political ledger. And to that end, Vicky, maybe I can ask you to react to it in this respect. You know, for the last two Democratic presidential nomination races, a self-declared septuagenarian socialist has really been right there almost at the finish line, running extremely competitively. Senator. And if you look at the current Democratic Party, you know, you've got, I guess they call themselves the Squad, led by AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a congresswoman from New York, you know, who's a self-declared socialist and unapologetically arguing for a much larger role for government. They are very popular in some parts of the United States right now in a way that the NDP just is not in Canada. I guess the question is, how does the NDP maybe try to benefit from some of that radicalism happening in the United States right now?
Well, I think the question really for Jagmeet Singh is, has he been able to carry the momentum of his win into his role as leader of the party? And I don't think we've necessarily seen that from him. And part of it is, you know, the lack of cash that they have as a party. And so the idea of an election for them, I think, is not necessarily, you know, one they want to answer, and they don't want to head into an election. But, you know, it's also the fact that they're unwilling to be, you know, unabashed supporters of labor efforts, of rights for workers, of speaking in the language of socialism. Part of the challenge of that is that the American socialists are asking for some of the things Canada already has. They're asking for universal health care. They're asking for expanded sick leave. They're asking for things that a lot of Canadians, depending on where you are in the country, already have. So what does that kind of socialism that is popular in the NDP amongst young women who largely support the NDP, where is that going to come from for Jagmeet Singh? How is he going to articulate that? And so I think that's really the question for the NDP, the Liberals, and the Conservatives. In that video message from Erin O'Toole on Labor Day, he was speaking about class. And, you know, all three of them have backed down off the questions of race, but I think are going to spend the next few months, election or no, talking about the class impact that this pandemic has had and how that has affected different people depending on where you are. They're possibly going to go after the middle class, but I think the Liberals, with the teasers that they put out about the budget, are maybe returning to Justin Trudeau's attempts at that fairness agenda, at going after the wealthy, at expanding social programs, and are maybe going to now listen to what the NDP have to say about questions around a universal basic income, expanded transit supports, green tax credits, all of those things. So I think for Jagmeet Singh, he's always pulled back on some of the NDP's agenda, but now has a window and an opportunity to be a little bit more aggressive and more vociferous in his support of what the NDP has to offer.
How are we doing economically right now?
So you're right, this is the biggest downturn ever in our history, and it's also notable for the fact that it hit women and low-paid workers hardest first, and their climb back has been very muted compared to other forms of rebounding. So what we're witnessing is, yes, a bounce back, but the bounce back itself is slowing down. And one could say, given where we're at in the cycle of the season and flu season coming up and people now starting to get together again in classrooms and in bars and so on and so forth, this is probably as good as it gets. We're not likely to see the same rate of a bounce back as we have previously, which should give us all pause.
Trevin, let me put you to work here. Do you agree with Armin on where we're at right now economically?
So I think where we're at is that we've entered this second phase of the economic aspects of the pandemic, where our recovery is going to be characterized by our economy operating below capacity. So the first phase was obviously basically putting our economy into a medically induced coma where we shut a number of businesses and we saw these historic declines in GDP and job losses, et cetera. As provinces and territories started to reopen and businesses started to reopen, we obviously saw a bounce back in terms of jobs, in terms of growth, in terms of consumer confidence as well. But we haven't gotten back up to pre-COVID levels, and we're not even that close to doing so. And so what we're seeing right now is that there's just this gap between, you know, the initial rebound and what's actually going to be necessary to get to actually get to full recovery. And so, in terms of the projections, most people are probably looking at early 2022 when we get back to normal, when we get back to pre-COVID levels. But as Armin mentioned, there are a few different variables that might accelerate or slow down that process. First of all is definitely if there's a second wave. And that's going to be a very bad case scenario. But secondly is also what the government response will be. And certainly we have a throne speech coming up in this month as well. And then we'll see whether the government puts in place what will actually get us towards growth. And then thirdly, there's also looking at the international scenario, which will have a huge impact on Canada and all Canadians as well, particularly with the U.S. election in November.
Well, Jennifer, maybe I can get you to pick up the story. People are wondering, when do we get back to normal, whatever normal means? As you look at things, what do you come up with?
I wish I had a firm timeline that I could give folks. I think the stage that we're in right now is not full recovery, right? We're in kind of that rehab stage after having gone through that medically induced coma. I'm going to borrow a term that's gaining some traction in the United States and talk about this as sort of a K-shaped recovery, meaning some sectors, some workers are doing not bad. If you're a higher wage earner, actually you've definitely made up all of the losses in terms of your hours. But we're still seeing 1.8 million workers who are unemployed or haven't regained all their pre-COVID hours. Unemployment is still over 10%. The slope of the employment gains is starting to flatten. This is not the curve that we want to be flattening. And there are big gaps that we're starting to see. So there's this real bifurcation in terms of who's actually participating in some of the recovery right now. Big gaps by gender, as Armin has mentioned, by income level, whether you have kids, racialized and Indigenous Canadians as well. And frankly, the data is starting to show where you live in the country is also going to be important. So it's a really tricky spot that we're in right now. My concern is not only do we get back to where we were in terms of the aggregate, but do we bring everybody along with us?
Avery, I gather we're still down 1 million jobs. What's your sense about what it would take to get those 1 million people back into the workforce?
So unfortunately, I think what we've done here is we've picked the low-hanging fruit, and now we need a ladder to get the rest of the tree. So what I mean by that is the jobs that we quickly recovered are in sectors where we can operate reasonably well with social distancing. I mean, I think you see some of your guests here are sitting at home. So there's lots of people who can work from home, and they're in the sectors where you can do that. We've reopened stores, and I think one of the things that rescued the economy, I like to say it was a masked man. It was the fact that we had superheroes running around with masks that let us open actually more of the economy successfully than we might have thought back in April. But the problem is some sectors, things like concert halls, convention centers, airlines, things where there's a lot of personal contact no matter how you slice it, those sectors are basically at zero. I mean, they're not in a recession. They're in a depression in terms of the number of flights, wedding halls, and so on. There's a lot of sectors that are basically still at zero. And I'm afraid that without the ladder to pick the high fruit, and I think the ladder is a vaccine or a treatment, rather than some magical government program, the best we're going to do for a while for those sectors is help people out with government assistance.
Peter, how strong a sense of the damage done to children by being out of school for so long do you think your profession currently has?
Well, I think we have a real problem. I mean, there is a fair bit of literature emphasizing how resilient kids are in the context of disaster. But this is a unique situation where the social isolation that Ronnie mentioned has gone on for a long time. We don't have a lot of experiences about that. And it does suggest that this could have long-term consequences unless we begin to repair the social isolation that the kids have experienced over the last 6 months or so.
Can we talk, Ronald, about how increased screen time is affecting either positively or negatively children right now in the province of Ontario? What are you finding?
So I think we need to first start that pre-pandemic, scientists from across the world, including our own scientists from Sick Kids and Unity Health, have shown that screen time is already having a negative impact on children. And now I just want you to practically think it through, that children, or at least some children, and even moving forward, will now sit for hours in front of the computer because they need to teach, they need to be taught, and need to learn. Mm-hmm. And if they then keep isolated from their friends, their only way to interact with them is through either social media and FaceTime or the phone. So we are dealing again with screen time. So we are now looking at a number of children who may sit in front of any type of screen for 6 to 8 hours per day. So we are just exponentially accelerating and increasing the problem that we already had with screen time before the pandemic started.
Could I get you then, Ronald, to offer the parents who are watching this some advice? Because, of course, at some point over the last few weeks, every parent had to indicate to his or her school board, my kid is going to go back or my kid is not going to go back. All things being equal, if you're reasonably assured that school is a pandemically safe place to be, is there any question but that the kid should be going back?
I think by and large, I would say kids should be going back to school, but it is at the end of the day a very individual decision. Every family has to look what their school is able to put in place in terms of the bundled measures in order to mitigate risk from infection as much as possible, and also look at their own family situation as much as possible. By and large, I think if parents can get comfortable with the idea of sending their children back to school, then that should be a priority. But there's so many other measures that come into place here that generally recommending this without an individual approach would be the wrong thing.
Andrea, we've sort of been focusing on right now children missing their friends as the biggest problem that they're dealing with right now. But of course, the isolation during this pandemic goes well beyond friends. Grandparents, for example, or older relatives are people, or friends of parents, for example, who might have been a part of kids' lives are probably not now because of the pandemic. And can you help us understand how that might be affecting young people today?
Yeah, we did look at whether or not certain households were multi-generational households, because we had some of that data in terms of household composition, and we didn't find really any differences in terms of that. But again, with some of the text responses, a very consistent theme that was coming out was separation from family and isolation from other extended family members, and the impact not only on the child but on the caregivers themselves, and losing all the community support, so losing school and other supports in the community, but also losing that contact and support from extended family members that also might provide some caregiving relief, was a consistent message that came out with the survey as well.
So as much as kids may complain about going to visit their grandparents, they actually do miss them when they can't see them?
I think so. Absolutely, yeah.
Good to know.
It's the same with school. They complain about school, but now they miss school.
Interesting. Okay. Let's, Sheldon, let's go to graphic 3 here if we can, because we're going to show some more results from the Ontario Parent Survey. This is not just on the kids, but on the parents of the kids. 34% reported some loss of income. 46% reported that a household member had applied for financial help offered by the federal or provincial government. So that's a lot of people obviously covered off during the course of this pandemic. And let's go to the next one, graphic 4. 57% of caregivers met the criteria for depression. 57%. And 30% of caregivers reported moderate to high levels of anxiety. Okay, let's get into this. Ronald Cohen, how does this affect children?
So thank you actually for sharing and showing these data, because I think it tells us that children don't live in their own isolation. They're obviously part of the whole family. And the anxiety exists all in society. And that translates to some of the anxiety within the family. I mean, you can probably imagine there's no single household in Canada who hasn't been speaking about the coronavirus all the time. And then if you add on additional stressors like financial instability or potential problems with going back to work, and now with the kids going back to school, we need to really look at this as the children as part of the family, and as we try to address the anxiety levels over the next few months particularly, it is the children, but it's also their parents, and we need to support them as much as we support the children.
And that's just some of what we covered this week on The Agenda. For more, including those conversations in full, you can always visit our website. That's tvo.org, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda. And that's it for this Friday, September 11th, 2020. Happy 80th birthday, incidentally, to former Ontario Cabinet Minister Gerry Phillips, the man from Scarborough Agincourt, and one of the very few people I've met in politics about whom no one has anything bad to say. Check out my piece on Gerry Phillips on our website, tvo.org. Happy birthday, Gerry. Next week, we'll turn our attention to childcare, underscore the difference between the stock market and the economy, and reflect on the deadly and defining dispute over Indigenous land known as the Ipperwash crisis. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you again back here on Monday.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. Ontario Hubs are made possible by the Barry and Laurie Green Family Charitable Trust and Goldie Feldman. And by viewers like you. Thank you.